Society hands every single generation an unwritten rulebook. It tells you exactly what success is supposed to look like. But following these rules is mathematically guaranteed to keep you broke. Today, we are exposing the most devastating financial trap every generation continues to fund, including your own. Look around you. Every day, you see people who look completely financially untouchable. It's the colleague who drives the new BMW and just booked another holiday. It's the uncle who owns a beautiful home but secretly can't afford to retire. On the surface, they have the assets, the lifestyle, and the aesthetic that screams success. But society played a devastating psychological trick on every single one of us. It handed us an invisible rulebook that equated looking wealthy with actually being wealthy. Over the last 60 years, the economy has fundamentally mutated, and the rules of the game have changed for every new generation that entered it. They don't share the same income, the same market conditions, or the same background. But because they are all playing by the same broken rulebook, they are all blindly walking into the exact same financial death trap. And the most terrifying part, the system designed this trap so perfectly that every single one of them feels like they are winning, right until the moment it destroys them. So what exactly is the trap? It isn't a lack of income. It isn't even that these people are inherently bad with money. The trap is far more insidious because it hides in plain sight. From the moment you earn your first paycheck, society hands you a checklist of success that prioritizes visible liabilities over invisible power. According to the Federal Reserve, total U.S. household debt recently shattered the $17 trillion mark, while the personal savings rate has plummeted to near historic lows. You aren't building wealth. You are buying the costume of wealth. And the money maintenance of that costume is exactly what silently drains your actual net worth down to zero. Real financial power is boring. It doesn't get likes. It's completely invisible to the outside world. But the system doesn't want you building invisible power. It wants you buying visible liabilities. Those who survive the trap figure out the difference. But to understand how to escape it, you have to see exactly how it evolved. Boomers were the first victims of the modern trap. Coming out of post-war era, these were people who watched their parents rent their entire lives and swore they would never do the same. The financial system recognized that psychological drive and drilled one absolute commandment into their heads. Renting is a failure. A paid-off house is the ultimate finish line. And to be fair, back then, it looked like a cheat code. Real estate was climbing, so they went all in. Today, they look like millionaires, but that wealth is largely a structural mirage. According to the Federal Reserve data, for the median American nearing retirement, the vast majority of their net worth is locked strictly in home equity. Their entire financial identity is trapped inside drywall and roofing. You cannot swipe your living room to pay for a medical emergency. You cannot slice off a piece of your kitchen to fund 20 years of retirement. The trap wasn't buying the house. The trap was making the house their entire financial identity. They traded total financial flexibility for a physical monument of success. But as paralyzing as the boomers' single asset trap was, the generation that followed them found a way to make it so much worse. Gen X played by the corporate rules, and on the surface, they crushed it. They grew up watching their parents sacrifice their entire youth to pay off a mortgage, and they made one quiet promise to themselves: we are actually going to enjoy our success. So they climbed the ladder, secured dual incomes, and unlocked serious cash flow. But the trap they fell into was a slow, silent bleed. Every promotion was immediately matched by a lifestyle upgrade. A higher salary justified the premium SUV. A year-end bonus funded the luxury vacation. It felt entirely justified. They worked brutal hours. They deserved the reward. They built a high-income machine with absolutely zero margin. According to Experian, Gen X currently carries the highest average debt burden of any generation. Their paychecks doubled, but the money never had a single second to compound because their upgraded lifestyle swallowed it whole to service auto loans, huge mortgages, and compounding credit balances before it could. They wake up at 50, making more money than they ever dreamed of, looking at their accounts and asking one terrifying question: where did it all go? While Gen X suffocated under the weight of their own upgrades, millennials walked into a completely different slaughterhouse. Millennials are the most culturally celebrated victims of the trap. They entered adulthood right as the 2008 recession shattered the global economy. The boomer house was completely out of reach. The traditional markers of success felt completely rigged. But this shift wasn't a sudden philosophical awakening. It was a forced macroeconomic reality. As central banks flooded the economy with cheap liquidity, asset prices soared high. So they deployed their capital into the only market that system hadn't hyperinflated: lifestyle. And it proved to be a financial catastrophe. Experiences do not compound. A backpacking trip through Europe will never pay you dividends in 20 years. A curated culinary tour doesn't generate passive income. This trap wasn't buying the plane ticket. The trap was using experience as a psychological coping mechanism to avoid building tangible wealth. They convinced themselves that collecting priceless memories was a viable substitute for building a portfolio. Though millennials prioritized experiences at the expense of assets, Gen Z has constructed a deeply ironic financial pitfall. Gen Z is the most financially literate generation in human history. They grew up watching breakdowns of index funds, compound interest, and the FIRE movement. They know exact mechanics of money. And yet they're walking straight into the most lethal version of the trap. Their trap is built on desperation. They grew up watching currency devalue and the traditional corporate ladder collapse. They understand market mechanics, liquidity, and even complex derivatives like options trading better than any generation before them. But because traditional safe yields are effectively dead for small portfolios, the system forces them entirely out on the risk curve. They aren't simply buying the costume of an investor. They're trapped in high-stakes casino, trading hyper-volatile assets and heavily leveraged positions because they know a standard 8% annual return on a $500 portfolio will never buy them a house. The modern trap is the normalization of risk disguised as the elite financial strategy. The system backed them into a corner where gambling feels like the only rational move left. And that is exactly what the trap wants you to believe. Okay, let's stop and look at the wreckage. 4 generations, 4 different scripts, 1 identical mathematical failure. And here is the reality that should make you deeply uncomfortable. Not a single one of these people woke up and chose financial stagnation. They didn't make a conscious mistake. They simply executed the exact blueprint society had handed them. That is the terrifying brilliance of the trap. It never feels like a trap when the jaws snap shut. It feels like progress. It feels like you're finally winning the game. Until the day you wake up and realize the game was rigged from the start. Every generation is playing a game they weren't invited to win. The only way to come out ahead isn't to play better, it's to change the game entirely. So how do you actually change the game? You stop playing their game. The invisible script every generation inherits has one fatal flaw. It prioritizes the signal of wealth over the substance of capital. You need to identify the lie you are currently funding, because the second you name the trap, the system loses its leverage over you. Real wealth is profoundly boring. It quietly builds in the background by consistently owning simple, reliable assets that actually put money back in your pocket. Every previous generation had a cultural excuse that made their specific trap feel perfectly logical. You don't. You now see the system for exactly what it is. Stop performing wealth and start building it, because the costume always looked better than the capital. It still does.